and today the most popular music company. Spotify is also a software company. So do you get the point that basically most of the successful companies are software companies? So the software technical skills matters a lot. And I'm very glad to be here where I'm talking to all the students who are having this team as their subjects. Um, yeah, so what I will be doing today, I will be just touch basing on HTML, which is a fabric of the internet, okay, which has become like integral part of our life. So before I go a little bit more in that, let's take a roll back to 21 or 27 years when originally this HTML was formed. Um, well, the gentleman name was Berners-Lee, and he has developed HTML. Well, the person sitting on the screen on the laptop is not Berners-Lee, by the way. So yeah, so he was the original, the guy who developed the HTML in the beginning, and it was developed with the intent of defining the structure of documents like headings, paragraphs, lists, so forth, to just facilitate the scientific information between researchers. Okay, so because they were all working on their own machines, and then what Berners-Lee wanted a system that would store all information in a center place, and which we call like web server now these days. So that everyone can access those documents. They don't have to rely on person who has that document. They can all access it whenever at the just click of a button, and make it possible to download and view a document without a single click. So that's why we call hyper markup language, because we can move from one page to another by a click of a button. And it will also allow people to find documents by clicking on those links. So that was the why this thing was originally came into picture, why we have, or not we, like Berners-Lee, they thought of implementing something as simple as HTML. So now roll forward 21 years or well 27 years or maybe more than that. Roll forward, now HTML is being used to format web pages with different tags. And now we have taken so massive leaps where all websites before they were static, now they all are so dynamic. They are so dynamic, so interactive that you can get all information on that. So what we will do today, we will go through some commonly used tags, which we use to create these HTML pages. Please pay attention because end of this workshop, there will be 3 projects, so which you can pick whatever you want to work on. So you will get a chance to bring your creative mind outside and design something you can be absolutely proud of. Okay, so before I jump into nitty-gritty of HTML, let me tell you some fun facts about the internet, which I'm sure you would love to know. So the fun fact, okay, we all know YouTube. Okay, I use it every day. I guess most of you guys also do it because I think I know more YouTube influencer than people they do yoga now these days, because most of them are like in YouTube influencer. So YouTube uploads 72 hours of video every single minute. Okay, and this is how popular it is. Every single minute, 72 hours of video. And you might not have guessed it, but most of those videos are about people's pets. Okay, the cat, parrots, rats, snakes, python, people have different pets. And second thing is, it is estimated by 2022, 90% of all new vehicles, they will have some sort of internet connectivity. Apple Play, there is Apple Hybrid, Android Auto. There are so many things coming up. And now there's another concept I'm sure you might have heard, that is IoT, that is Internet of Things. So now we are going in a direction where there will be like self-driven car. And this is where the internet has become so important. That's why we are having blockchain. So just make sure system never goes down. It is always up and running. Okay, and another thing, I'm sure I might have lots of car lovers here, and especially sports car. So you can see the Ferrari Spider that generates 661 horsepower. And that amount of horsepower that zooms for it from 0 to 100 kilometer in 3.1 seconds. Okay, so we need that much power, 661 horsepower. But if you can imagine how much power we need to run the internet, it takes 50 million horsepower to run internet. So you can see how big and massive it is. Okay. Most of it is used by file streaming and media streaming because that is taking more than half of the traffic. And another surprising thing is that most of the internet use is not done by human. They are done by malware or internet bots just for spamming activities. Okay, which is, this was, I'm sure when Berners-Lee introduced this HTML, he would have never thought that, this HTML will be abused by some people. But, we have good people, we have not so good people. So, but we are good people, okay? So we just learned about HTML today. Okay, so before I go on next one, so this is what it will need, that what sort of setup we would need. So we need two things. One thing to write HTML, and second thing is to run HTML. To write the HTML, we can use Notepad on Windows. We can use text edit on Mac or Sublime Text. There are like some third party. They have some IntelliSense in it. What IntelliSense is, I will let you know when I try showing you demo. And we have any, or in terms of browser side, make sure some browser installed, especially Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. But please, for God's sake, no Internet Explorer, okay? But that might not work. And the most important thing is your attention, okay? So next one is, you might be thinking, okay, what this session is about. So this session is about for beginners, for sure, okay? Who have very little experience to no experience with HTML and CSS before. We will be working mainly around HTML syntaxes. You are not going to learn HTML or anything for that matter in 30 or 45 minutes, okay? Let's be realistic here. So what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to scratch a surface just to give people ideas, how and what it is, how they can use it. And the most important thing is to tell you a wider picture, okay? So you can understand, you can start relating things. So that will be my whole intention for this session. Please be patient, and most importantly, you have to really enjoy learning. So as our CTO was talking about, that this stream means you will keep learning on and on. There will be new technology every other day, new tool. So you need to have the passion of learning. If you think, okay, I've done my degree and don't want to learn anything, then possibly this is not best fit for yourself. So this is for creative people. They just keep, working, keep thinking. And I was reading it somewhere that, more you think, more neuron your body or your mind produces. So that it means you become more wiser. Okay, so again, you will be learning something every single day, even if after spending like many years as a web developer. Okay. Okay, so far, are you guys with me? Yeah. Okay, I take as yes. Yeah. Okay. Right. So this was more about like why we need HTML and where we were and where we are right now. So let's go a little bit more into HTML now, that what HTML is. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. A lot of people are just starting out. They don't realize that HTML is not a programming language at any level. It's a markup language for creating web pages, documents. So what I mean by that markup language is the presentation layer, that how customer or whoever look at the web page, they will see the content. Okay, so whatever tags we use to write this information on an HTML page, just presentation layer. I think it is very important for me to let everyone know and especially differentiate between a programming language and a markup language. So one of the key element of programming language is logic, where we can put lots of conditions like if else. where you can say if true, then do this, and if false, then don't do that, something like that. So for HTML is like building block of the web. Every single site you see output HTML to the browser, and no matter what kind of advanced programming it uses in the backend. All right, you can build a website using just HTML and CSS. CSS is a styling language, so where it makes it more nicer and more better with different font size, colors, and a little bit of animation as well. But mainly we will be covering HTML in this session. So you can have just an HTML site without JavaScript or any programming language. It will be purely presentational, as I just said. You can't have like on store website, where you can buy and sell things with only HTML. You need some backend languages to work with. But again, that is for some other session, some other day. Okay. So let's go on and let's say, so what my intention is, I'm just giving you like on very high level overview before we can jump into the technical bit where I can show you demo or something. Okay, then where we will learn together. So right now what we need to do is, the great thing about HTML is that you don't have to worry about any kind of special server or hosting company. So usually what happens, let me give you a little bit brief overview. So when web developers, they write HTML page or they create website, either they run it locally, or for example, I can run it on my local machine, but if someone else want to access it, then I need to deploy it somewhere. Okay. So to deploy it, I need to, have an account with Azure, or there are lots of web hosting company. So there I will upload my project and then they will make it live and people can access that. Okay, so but for sake of this exercise, what we can do, we can create a file in our computer, which we will do shortly, and we can give it a .html extension, and that's about it. So when our website is ready to deploy the internet, then we can buy domain name, as I said, and we can deploy it there. But for now, what happens when we create any HTML page, there will be lots of tags like P for paragraph, H for heading, images, and those things. So there are hundreds of tags, which I definitely don't remember. So what is happening is that I would be giving some sort of a cheat sheet. So I will provide that to you. There it will contain all the tags, and we will provide you that before you can create any of your project. Okay. Okay. Before taking more time, let's jump into the basic HTML structure. This is very, very important to understand. So this is relatively easy to learn because every tag is predefined and you only need to know the work of the tags and their attribute. Okay. So this is HTML is a structure of each individual web page, which is supposed to look like. And then where you can see these angle brackets. So that's where you will be putting tag on. So by looking at the screen, you can clearly see it's self-explanatory actually. So first thing is, so what I would be doing in next few slides, I will be going through the main text, but on a very high level, you can see these tags, HTML body, and these are the content like HTML first program and hello world. Okay, so these tags, they normally come in pair, like closing tags, opening tags. Whatever we put between tags, they are called content, and the whole line is known as element. Okay, so element contains content and tags, opening tags and closing tags. And there are a few self-closing tags as well, which we will cover in our demo. Okay, so first thing is, as you can see here on our basic structure, first thing is head. So usually in head, we put like what will be the title of our page, and we can provide some metadata. Metadata can be anything like who was the author or what sort of versions we were doing. So this information will not be visible on the web page, but for someone, they can come back and then they can visit, okay, this is what we have done. And next thing is heading. I think it's very easy. You can see here for H1, you can see bigger text. For H6, you will see the smaller text. Okay. So, and this is very important one, HTML link, like how you can link your documents or how you can link any external website. Okay, so this is the tag for that, hey, and hyperlink, and is a word or group of words. Well, as you can see on the screen, it is again very self-explanatory. Um, and then there are a few more things like you can see target. If you want to open in another tab, you can just say blank there, or self, it will open in the same page. But at this point in time, if you're not getting everything, but that is fine. We will do a demo there. Okay. So this is a tag for including images. So how you can, because I think if someone said, a picture speaks 1,000 times more than words. So this is the tag we use to get pictures on our web page. Okay. And this is HTML text formatting. Okay, some text you want to make it bold, some is strong, some italic, computer output. So there are, as I said, hundreds of tags you can use in HTML. Okay, next one is HTML table. We use like tabular form a lot, especially say, for example, we want to talk about students, like what's their name, is their school or their favorite subject, anything like that. So we have them in tables. And even in tables, there are lots of tags like TR for row, TD for table data. But again, we will cover that shortly. Okay, shall we do some demo now? So whatever theory I taught you here so far, let's implement that, okay? All right, so what we are doing now is I'm just opening a page. You guys want to, open your notepad if you're on Windows, or if you are on Mac, you can open text edit, okay? 1 second, let me open that. Second. So I need to close this one down here now. Okay, so before I come for this session, I created one index page. So the first most important thing is that whenever we create any first page, we always call it index.html page. Okay, so this is our entry point. What happens when we deploy our website to a publisher and domain publisher? They will first come at the index.html. That will be our entry point. So what I have done is literally I spend a few minutes in the morning, just create this page. Okay. So here what I'm doing, so maybe what I can do is go through those tags I have used in the background. So that will give you some ideas that what changes you need to do to make sure your changes appears on the website. So what am I doing? I'm not using Notepad. I'm just using, this thing is called Sublime Text. Okay, this is really good. Why I'm saying this is so good is that, if I'm say going to Notepad, there, if I just need to put something like type, so I have to type everything there, yeah. But if I do something in here, and all I need to do is
Sandeep, are you sharing your screen?
We can't see the text editor. We just see
all
the
right.
browser.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but could you see the website before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so as you, well, in case you haven't seen that, so this is the website, just very simple one I created. So there I have used lots of tags in the background. And what I would be doing, I was just going through those code and helping everyone make understand that why we're using those codes, those tags and the code there. So let me share my IntelliSense. So I'm using this tool, not Notepad, because in Notepad I have to write everything. But in here, what I need to do is, for example, I go here and I create one page, and I just call it say test.html. Yeah, and now I can go and open that file here. So in this case, if I just say HTML, see, automatically it brought the boilerplate code here. So the basic code is already here. So I don't have to worry too much about the syntax thing. And I will be spending less time, juggling around syntax rather than being creative that what kind of content I can add, how can I make it beautiful or like that. So title is, we think like first page. So this is how it will appear on the page. On here, whatever I can put it, automatically it helps. This tool is really cool. So feel free to, explore this. But yeah, for sake of our the page, original page I shown you. So HTML page, first thing it starts with the doc type HTML. So what does that mean? A browser can open a lot of different type of documents. It can open XML page, it can open PDF, and now it is getting more dynamic. So it will be supporting lots of other documents type as well. So when we put this doc type at HTML, what we are doing, we are instructing the browser that this is a HTML page. Okay, so we start with that tag. And thereafter, we just start with HTML. Okay, and that's opening bracket. And this is closing in the end. Okay. And thereafter, it comes about heading, that whatever changes you want to do. So it says landing page. And if I go to my browser, I would be seeing that landing page here. Yeah. Guys, whoever turned on camera, if you can nod your head, then I would see that you're at least seeing the screen. That will be good. Yeah. So the heading, I put it here, that will appear here on the landing page. So let me see if I can share my whole screen. That will be great. Okay, so I guess everyone can see my screen. And I'm doing is
both are good. Send it. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I'm doing, I'm just opening it side by side. Yeah. So I hope people can see both. Yeah, I hope you can see Sublime Text and browser.
Yep.
Okay, right. That is good. So the title, I'm putting it here, that will appear on this side. So for example, if I say workshop, I click on save, refresh it. So this title will appear here. Okay, I'm just putting this random title, but we'll make sure that we put the relevant one. And then it comes to head. In head, I explain that, and then in body. So if I put say H1, that will make it more bigger. This, I click on save. And as you can see, that depending on what kind of hash we're using, 1 to 6. So 1 is the biggest one, and maybe you can just decrease that there. Okay, and the second one is image source. So what I'm doing, I'm just telling, find this image, welcome.png, and just put it here. So what I need to do is I have created this folder over here, workshop, and in there I'm just putting this image. Okay, and at the time of running or loading this HTML page, this image will be picked from this location, and it will appear in the page over here. And then there are other things, like as I can see that what I have done, like I changed the color a bit, font size, make it like italic, emphasis on this one. Well, there is one saying about programming or about web designing or anything for that matter, is you cannot learn swimming by looking others. Okay. So what I mean by that, you can see the code, you see, oh, this is really cool. This is easy, not too difficult. I can do it day and night. But actually, when you start writing it and compiling it by yourself, you will encounter lots of issues. And that's where learning is. Okay, that's what it will make you a good web developer down the line. That when you make a mistake and then Many times people spend countless hours just to solve them, but this is when they actually learn stuff. So again, you cannot learn swimming by looking others swim. So same way you cannot learn, whatever changes I'm doing. So what I'm going to do, we quickly go through the code in next 10 minutes or so, and thereafter we will jump on the exercise that you can do. There are a few tags here. So one is called HR. HR is that horizontal line over here. And then styles, as I already mentioned, that you can put different type of styles there. H2 is good. I just put heading there. Okay, what are the good stuff happening around it? Okay, so I can see the spelling mistake. So around word today. Well, these are actually, this is not rubbish data. So this is real. These are 5 good things happening around today in the world. So any changes what you make, quickly save and they will reflect it here. HR, as I said, and BR is, so as you can see that we have opening tag and closing tag, but these are self-closing tag. What does that mean? That they don't need to be closed as we have to do it here, like H2, we open it and we close them. But for BR is break in the line, and HR is the straight line, what you can see here. Okay, so what I have done, we use forms, tables, images, and list in a web page a lot. Okay, so what I have done, I created 4 pages here just for reference. So let's go to forms first. Okay, so I go click on forms, and this is where it takes us. And even for here, I need to open. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to open that file. I go here, and this is the code behind what you can see on the screen. Okay, so usually what happens that when you put any data here, like I put, say, anything, access at home, online sources, anything like that. Okay, so this is what the HTML part is. Okay, and down the line we need to submit this form, and this information need to go somewhere. So I will cover what need to be done in my next slide, where I will be saying like what is next. But as of now, we are just focusing on the presentation layer, the HTML one here. So I guess here title I already explained there, and this is the body. And then what we need to do is we need to put what type of input type we want. So this will be our heading, and this will be the name. And same thing, I just put it for department. I put some PRs here, like break line. Tell me about yourself, and their type is radio. This yes and no. So these are text types. These are radios. Okay. And these are the comments. So we have lots of different input types in a form. Okay, possibly you want to remember that. And then we have check boxes. So what I have done in this example, I have tried to introduce or include all type of input types. Okay. So same as we go down, there are like options over here. We can select something by default by using this keyword as called selected. And that's about it. So once I click on submit form, nothing happens because we need to program it in JavaScript or any other programming language. But for the sake of it, just to make everyone understand what I am doing, I'm using one utility that is over here in Azure. What it does, it accepts the data and it just shows you there. Okay, so what form action means, that record will go to this link. So when you click on submit form, traffic or the flow will go to this URL. Okay, and method I will describe in a minute. So once I click on submit one, so what it does, it is going to this URL. Okay, and this URL, what it does, it receives all the information what came through and just displays here. Okay, so when we call that method, when we call this URL, we were using method as post. So what does that mean? We were sending the data in a body when we made that request to that URL. Okay, what I can do, I can also make it get. So if I do it get, it means the data will appear in the as a query string. So that means if I save that here, continue that here. Yeah, so as you can see now, that data is seen as a query string, which is not very good use of it, because, for example, if someone hacked in your system, they might be looking what URLs you are calling, and hacker can find out, okay, these are the URLs. They can easily find out, okay, what sort of data you are sending. So that is always good exercise that you can use post. Okay, so this is about I'm just a bit conscious of time here because I want to give you some time for projects. So this is one thing about forms, and same thing we can do for images as well. So for images, so there are two ways you can link the images on your page. Okay, one is by relative path. Okay, and one is by absolute path. What I mean by relative path is you have those images in your local machine, and which you can give link here. And for absolute path is that that image is sitting somewhere on the internet or some CDN somewhere, then you are just giving that path and you are calling it. Okay, so whatever you're seeing on the screen here, that's the code behind it. Okay, same thing for list. We have unordered list, ordered list, a descriptive list as well. So you can see the code here again. Yeah, like this. So there are different texts. So the now main important thing is that where you can find these tags. So let me share this with everyone because this will be very, very important. So I can possibly put it here in the chat. Okay, so feel free to go to this URL. So when you go to this URL, you will see this cheat sheet. Okay, so there it will tell, okay, let me go up. First thing is about document summary, what you want to put in body, title. So you would know, you have that explanation there. These tags you need to use for styling, for script, for document structure, like HR, BR, which I already explained, P, span. For text formatting, you want to make your text look a bit different, you can see it there. You already have some examples over here just for your help. Same for link and images. Okay, so what we have done so far is we went through the theory, then we went through the practical, and as I said in the beginning, that you might not able to learn everything in 45 minutes, but at least it gave you the gist of things, you know, how it looks right from the outset, you know, from outside, how you look at HTML and how that get formatted. So what I'm suggesting everyone is that I have 3 projects. Maybe we can go to our breakout room. I guess I'm not sure, Jane, if you or someone else already identified those 3 top 3 3 projects. What we have it here, that maybe we can assign this project to one team or any team, like how people want to take it. So people can start creating a tribute page, and they can read the details. I put some tips there as well, an event page. Or you seize the opportunity to, you know, just describe about yourself, how good you are, your projects, niche skills and interest. So are people comfortable to jump on their machine and start writing code?
Yeah, I think it might be good if we give the students a chance to maybe take a screenshot of each of the 3 projects, and then once they go into their breakout rooms, they can pick which one they feel most comfortable with. If we just filter through those slides again, so they have the chance to take a read through those.
Yeah, I do understand this is like not very long session to understand everything, but at least people will have some basic idea. And this is where, you know, the programming is. This is your creativity, that how you can think outside box, how you can use all those texts. So you have been provided all the ingredients, and now it is up to you how you make a best recipe out of it. Okay, now you have access to all text, all information, you know how you want to use it. Don't worry, you will make mistake for sure. You won't able to compile at first instance, maybe, but that's fine. That's how we learn. So give it a shot. Let's give it a try, and then see how many people they are successful to create these spaces.
I also have a thesis in human-computer interaction, which is a discipline that encompasses many of the concepts of UX and UI design. I love talking about these topics, and I'm really glad I get to share some insights with you today. So now that you know who I am, let's get started. I've set a little agenda for the meeting just so we know where we're going. We're going to start by defining and demystifying some terms, then discuss some roles in UX and UI. We're going to look at a design process model called the double diamond, learn about some heuristics, look at some wireframes and how to make them, and then recap and next steps to get you ready for your challenge. So what are UX and UI? Are they the same? How are they related? Let's find out. What is UX? UX stands for user experience, if you have not heard the term before. User experience is the entire interaction between a user and a product. User experience designers are responsible for creating experiences, credibility, and interaction with the brand. They achieve this via storytelling, engagement, objectives, and usability. User-centered design processes, user research, personas, user stories, the whole kit and caboodle, these are all tools that can help develop a strong user experience. A user interface is different to this. A user interface is a digital space where users see and perceive information. This includes desirable visual elements and requires proficiency with user interface tools to develop. User interfaces require layout, visual design, and branding. And as such, user interface designers work closely with a number of different teams, including UX designers, brand and marketing, and customer experience in order to understand their objectives and bring it to life visually. They develop style guides to use as a basis and create high fidelity wireframes using design tools like Adobe XD, Sketch, InVision, and Figma. So, what are these roles that exist within the space? I'm actually going to start a little bit more basic than these terms that we have just learned. We're going to start with graphic design, which might be a term that is more familiar to you. Graphic design is where all visual design starts. Graphic design, simply put, is the art of deciding how things should look. Graphic designers make choices about color, fonts, and arrangement of visual elements in layouts. However, graphic design work can exist in online spaces. It can also exist in print materials. So while UI might exist purely in a digital space, graphic design work can exist online, website, mobile apps, etc. Graphic design work also exists in print magazines, book covers, in-store displays, and a variety of in-person mediums. In contrast, UI design exists solely in a digital space where users see and perceive information. UI design focuses on the visual design of interactive elements like form fields, animations, drop-down menus, buttons, and other clickable items that you would be familiar with. UI designers take the framework and wireframes created by UX designers and translate them into high-fidelity visual deliverables, which are then handed off to a development or engineering team to produce the product. The final one, UX designers, what do? They are problem solvers for products, business, content, behaviors, and especially for people. UX designers are problem solvers at heart. UX design intends to meet the needs of users with an experience that is usable and delightful. UX designers take a broader view on how to make a product or service usable, enjoyable, and accessible by applying a user-centered design process. This exists beyond just the interface that your user would interact with. So, how do we actually implement all of these things? We're not all going to be a UX designer. We're not all going to be a UI designer. We're not all going to be a graphic designer, but we do need to know how to work in tandem to achieve this overall user experience. Design processes are used to provide a framework around product development and turning ideas into products so that we can have some concrete steps to follow in order to go from idea to reality. Today, we're going to look into the double diamond design process model, which will help us delve deeper into UX and UI roles, what they encompass, and how to get started with your own project in your groups. The double diamond approach is a design process model that was popularized by the British Design Council back in 2005. The two diamonds represent a two-phase process, moving from the left to the right, that can also be conducted in a cyclical way. So we don't just go through it one time, we can go back to the beginning and go over and over again. The left sides of each diamond expand and reflect exploring an issue more widely or deeply using divergent thinking. The right sides of each diamond contract, reflecting focused action and convergent thinking. You can think of it as expansive thinking followed by refinement in a research phase on the left and a design phase on the right. The double diamond suggests that the design process should have 4 phases: discover, define, develop, and deliver. Discover is expansive, followed by define, which is refining. Then developing is expansive, followed by deliver, which is refined again. So to add a little more detail to this, the discovery phase is where we begin. We start on the left and the problem goes in. We have a sense of what the problem is and we want to know more. The discovery phase encourages us to understand rather than simply assume what the problem is. And it involves speaking to and spending time with people who are affected by the issue you are trying to solve. Then, using the insights gathered from that discovery phase, we can move into the defining portion of the challenge in a different way. We can look at the problem we're framing and we see it in a different way because of all the research that we have conducted. This is also where you'll be able to generate a very clear problem statement before moving into the next phase. At the beginning, you thought you knew what the problem was, and now you really do. So that problem definition comes out of completing the first diamond. Develop involves thinking expansively once again. You know what the problem is, you know the problem definition. Now we can then define the challenge in a different way. We will be giving different answers to a clearly defined problem, seeking inspiration, coming up with ideas, and co-designing with a range of different people. So we want to come up with as many different ideas as possible. We want to draw inspiration from multiple different sources and basically have a large set of potential solutions, which will then whittle down in the delivery phase. We test different solutions in the delivery phase at a small scale. We reject those that don't work and we improve the ones that will work. We might then also need to go back to the beginning and retest our problem as we now understand it. So we'll spend time today traversing the double diamond from left to right. And when you're in your group, you will be doing this as well. All 4 phases can be done collaboratively, though it is important to know when I say collaboration, I do not mean group work. Especially at school, group work can often feel like a bit of a relay race. You know, you divide up the work, you do your part first, then the next person does their part, and you're handing the baton from one person to another. Collaboration, as I see it, is more like a rowing team, where you're rowing in tandem, heading towards the same goal. So the reason that this double diamond process is really effective is because you all share an understanding of where you're headed and you can work in parallel towards the same goal. So try to take this approach wherever possible in order for everybody to feel involved, in order to generate ideas, and in order to learn as much as possible from one another. Now, at this point, you may be itching just to design an interface. You know, we started there and now I'm taking you somewhere else. You may just want to get your hands on the tools. Why is it necessary to do so much work before we actually just start making something? Why do we do any of this? Why do we do any of this in the first place? Can't I just go and make something? And there's a very simple answer, which is that if we dive straight into making things without doing our homework, you may land up with something beautiful but useless. I'm sure you've all been in a position before where you've got an assignment to do for school and you're so happy you've hit the word count, and then you read the question again and you realize you didn't understand it. Now you've written, though you may have written the right number of words and it's beautiful English and whatever it is, it's not actually what was being asked of you. We don't want to land up with something beautiful and useless. We want to make sure we understand the problem before we go about trying to solve it. Making things for the sake of creative expression is also totally fine. But ultimately, the point of UX design, it is different to art, it's different to art and artistic expression. UX design is there to make sure we're making the right thing rather than just making something, right? So to do that, we need to understand people. This is why we bother. If we're trying to make an idea that other people will connect with, that will make people feel understood, then we actually have to connect with them and understand them. We have to conduct research that puts us in a good position to empower them with our ideas. All good things take time, and we want to ensure that we understand the problem and the people we're designing for well enough to have a go at actually solving it. Which is not to say I'm not going to give you any tools. We are going to learn some tools now. We're going to put some tools in our tool belts. I'm sure you've used some pretty shonky apps and websites before. When you've seen a bad interface, you feel frustrated, you get annoyed, you might get stuck and not know what to do. It's very easy to say that's confusing or that looks bad, but to actually articulate why, we can learn something called usability heuristics. It's a little bit harder to put our finger on exactly why interfaces are bad. However, usability heuristics give us a shared language that we can use to discuss the benefits, the pros and cons of different interfaces and talk about interface design. So 25 years ago, Jacob Nielsen described 10 general principles of interaction design. These principles have become the rules of thumb for human-computer interaction, and all interface designers use these usability heuristics when thinking about what they are designing. They can be used as a checklist when designing your user interfaces during and after you have made them. And usability heuristics also enable us to communicate with one another about the choices that you've made in your designs. So there are 10 of them. We are going to go through each one. But to begin with, I'm just going to read them out so you get comfortable with the language. We're going to deep dive into what each of them mean and look at some examples in a moment. So, visibility of system status, match between system and real world, user control and freedom, consistency and standards, error prevention, recognition rather than recall, flexibility and efficiency of use, aesthetic and minimalistic design, help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors, and finally, help and documentation. So you may have noticed that these heuristics are not prescriptive. They're not saying, put the button here and make the menu have this many items in it. They won't tell you what to do, but they will tell you how to do it. Using usability heuristics can actually help you save massive amounts of time, especially in early planning, so you can direct your attention to more complex design challenges. Now, it is important to note that while these heuristics were originally developed in 1990, and that might seem like a really long time ago, the language has only changed slightly over the last 30 years. The heuristics themselves have remained relevant and unchanged since 1994. So even though this might seem like, why are you teaching me such old content right now? Nielsen himself says, basically, when something has remained true for 26 years, 1994 was when they finalized the wording of these things. When something has remained true for 26 years, oh no, typo on my slide. It's meant to say 26. Okay, when something has remained true for 26 years, it will likely apply to future generations of user interfaces as well. The perfectionist in me wants to exit this slideshow and change that right now, but you'll just have to bear with me and believe my dates. All right, let's get into it. Visibility of system status means that the design should always keep users informed about what is going on. This can be done through appropriate feedback within a reasonable amount of time. When users know the current system status, they learn the outcome of prior interactions and determine next steps themselves. Predictable interactions create a sense of trust in the product as well as in the brand. So tell them what happened, what is happening, what is about to happen. Show them so that they know and can learn. I've got a little example on the right that says your cart is empty, so that when I'm in my empty cart, I know that I can put things in there. I should put things in there. I want to put things in there. And it's also given me a very, very easy option to immediately go and do that at the bottom. So number 2, match between system and real world. The design should speak the user's language. That means using words, phrases, symbols, and concepts that are familiar to the user rather than any internal jargon. You should make information appear in a natural and logical order by following real-world conventions. Be careful though, because sometimes the way you design depends on your specific users. So terms that may seem reasonable and clear to you and your group members may be unfamiliar or confusing to your users. Icons are actually a great example of the match between the system and the real world. There is no guesswork required as to what I am clicking on when the icon looks like the object that it is mimicking in real life. My trash looks like a trash can. My folder looks like a folder. There's no surprises. I know what's going on. And there's a match between what the system's doing, how it behaves, and what the real world is that I am used to. When a design's control flow follows real world conventions and corresponds to desired outcomes, it's called natural mapping. And natural mapping makes it easier for users to remember how the interface works and makes an experience feel intuitive. We all have a sense of what is natural and logical. And if we can put that into our user interface, then we are going to give our users an easier time of understanding what we're trying to do. Next one, user control and freedom. Believe it or not, users perform actions by mistake. We maybe want to define the most perfect, beautiful UI that can never have any mistakes, but we've all gone and navigated somewhere we didn't intend to be. Or while we're exploring a new app, we accidentally clicked on something. So we've all needed like clearly marked emergency exits before, basically to leave an unwanted state without having to go through an extended process, close my app, open it again. That is not what we're aiming for. When it's easy for people to back out of a process or undo an action, it fosters a sense of freedom and confidence in the design because I can retain a sense of control within the system and I don't get stuck or feel frustrated. If I've reached somewhere and I didn't mean to be there and you've given me a very easy way to get back where I needed to go, I feel a sense of control and I feel a sense of freedom. So my example on the screen here has this little pop-up that has an undo. I might have done something by mistake. We've all deleted a document by mistake and gone, oh my God, how the hell am I going to retrieve that? Supporting undo and redo actions is actually the most common way to implement user control and freedom. But of course, there are other little things that we can do along the way that will support this. Consistency and standards. Basically, we need to follow conventions, right? Most apps sort of look the same. And I know that can sound boring, but we need to follow these conventions for a very important reason. And that's so that users are not left scratching their head, wondering whether different words or situations or actions actually mean the same thing, right? Jacob's law, Jacob being Jacob Nielsen, who wrote these things, states that people actually spend most of their time using digital products other than the one you are making right now, right? Most of the time, if I'm a software engineer working on the Instagram app, if I'm a software engineer at Google working on Google Docs, you know, nobody spends 100% of their time on each of these things. Most of the time we're spending on different things. So we need to actually draw from this external convention in order to maximize the ability for the user to understand my interface. Users' experiences with other products set expectations for your product, and you can't escape from that. So failing to maintain consistency can actually increase the cognitive load on the user by forcing them to learn something new. And you can see here, we've got a very stock standard username and password. I am not going to rename that something strange so that the user wonders, am I logging in right now? What am I meant to enter here? If it's actually a username and password, just call it what it is. Okay, error prevention. We can be our absolute best at defending against errors. Good error messages are important, but we'll talk about that later. What we are going to talk about in this error prevention category is that the best designs actually anticipate carefully and prevent problems from occurring in the first place. This is done via research and testing, not actually by design in the first place, interface design. You want to actually remove as many error-prone conditions from your app as possible by checking for them and preventing users from ever being able to get into a scenario like that. You actually want to also present users with confirmation options before they do anything that is committing to an action. You might want to confirm with them, are you sure you want to do that? This is error prevention. So we're not talking about error handling, what to do when something goes wrong. We'll talk about that in a moment. Error prevention is, how do I stop this from happening before it even happens? And the reason for this is because there are actually two types of errors. There are slips and there are mistakes. Slips are unconscious errors caused by inattention. When you're walking and going on your phone, or when you're maybe watching TV and being on your phone, or somebody's talking to you while you're on your laptop, you might make a mistake that's a bit of a slip. It wasn't because you were using it wrong. It was just because there was a lack of attention being paid. Your mind was divided. Whereas mistakes are conscious errors based on a mismatch between the user's mental model and the design. So we actually need to prevent errors because we know that they're going to happen. Errors are going to happen. So if we can anticipate them, then we can prevent them. This next one is probably the first real deviation from something you might be comfortable with, recognition rather than recall. So I will highlight this with an example. If I asked you, what is the capital of Portugal? You would have to know that already and then remember it, right? But if I asked you, is Lisbon the capital of Portugal? The cognitive load's actually a lot lower because you can recognize the information in the question rather than having to know it and then remember it. So this is what is meant by recognition rather than recall. I want you to recognize something. I don't want you to have to remember. Humans have limited short-term memories, and interfaces that promote recognition reduce the amount of cognitive effort required from the users. So what you're seeing on the screen here is actually a reminder. Here's something you've recently viewed. This is an example of recognition rather than recall. They're not making you go and search for a pair of headphones that you looked at a week ago. They're actually prompting you and saying, hey, you looked at this. Maybe you still want to be looking at it and connecting with it. Users are also more likely to use your interface correctly if they're able to recognize this information rather than recall it. It draws upon their previous experience using your application. They shouldn't have to remember information from one session to the other. They shouldn't have to remember information from one part of the interface to the other part of the interface. You want to make elements, actions, and options visible to minimize the load on the user's memory. Next one is flexibility and efficiency of use. Experts and novices will use your interface differently. I'm sure you've watched how painstakingly slowly your parents or grandparents are at using their phones and laptops. You know, right click, copy, right click, paste, right? And you're like, Control C, mom, Control C, Control V, let's go. You may even have a clued in friend who's helped you with a shortcut where you're like, oh my God, I didn't know I could do that. That's so helpful. Shortcuts, which can remain hidden for novice users or new users, may speed up interactions for expert users. As you become more comfortable with an interface, you want to enable experts to traverse it really quickly and do what they want really quickly. This enables the design to actually cater to both novices and experts, so inexperienced and experienced users at the same time, without cluttering it up or making it hard for the novices to use. You don't want to increase a learning curve. You don't want to pretend or assume everybody's an expert, but you do want to provide this hidden meaning that can be used by experts. Flexible processes can be carried out in different ways so that people can pick whatever method works for them. All right, I see in the chat, like having a skill curve. Yeah, basically like having a skill curve. If you want to get somebody who's really comfortable with your thing to use it quicker and better, then you're going to want to provide different shortcuts for them to be able to do that and make your application usable in a flexible way. The highlight on the screen here is that if you hold down on an app on your iPhone, it actually gives you a menu with some of the options that are available in app. That's a really shorthand way to get through to a really complex interaction that would have otherwise taken a number of clicks to get to. So for those who know, that's basically what it is. For those who know, you can do something a lot quicker. Whereas if you're not really sure what you want to do on YouTube, you just want to scroll and you've accidentally clicked the search shortcut from the homepage, you'd be like, whoa, I'm really deep in this app and I didn't expect to be here. That's sort of why they have to remain hidden in a way from novice users. That's a great question, Asha. Thank you. Aesthetic and minimalistic design. This is number 8 out of 10. This is the only usability heuristic that actually directly addresses visual design. And I've got Google's homepage. I took this screenshot yesterday, so that's why it has the little Google doodle on there. But usually it would just say Google in its beautiful, simple logo. It is the original minimalist design because it really embodies this heuristic. Interfaces should not contain irrelevant information. Every extra unit of information in an interface competes with relevant units of information for visibility and importance. If you look at Google's homepage through the ages, it is still one text box, 2 buttons, and the logo. That's it. Even as the logo has changed, even as they may have resized it, redone the layout. As for what is actually there, you want your key functions to be very visible on your homepage. They should support the user's primary goals. So the heuristic doesn't mean you have to have a flat or boring design. It just means you should make sure that the content and visual design helps the user focus on the essentials over here. So the reason, the sort of undertone of this as well, the reason that Google Doodle is so effective is because the site is so simple as well. It is what our eye is drawn to. We have a convention in our head that it's going to look a certain way. Now there's a little bit of visual interest. That's where my eye is drawn to. So it's effective in multiple ways. It can draw your eye to something that is new and unusual, the one thing that stands out. And it means that it's not competing for attention from heaps of different things on your site. Okay, now we can talk about errors. We can't ensure that user interfaces are perfect, and we can't ensure that users interact with our interface perfectly. So when a user does encounter an error, there are some rules around how we should react. The first is, it's very important that they understand what happened. What happened? How did I get here? How can I get out of here? Make sure your error messages precisely indicate the problem in plain language and constructively suggest a solution. So here's your little exit strategy once more. Error messages also often take advantage of native UI, like your iPhone's error message or a Windows error pop-up, so the users can recognize them instantly. You do not need to reinvent the wheel. You can use something that is immediately recognizable as an error in order to help users recognize, diagnose, and recover. Finally, we have help and documentation. It is best if a system doesn't require any additional explanation. However, that is not always possible, especially as we make complex applications. It may be necessary to provide documentation to help users understand how to interface with the product correctly and how to complete their tasks. So help and documentation content should be easy to search so the user can easily find the answers that they're looking for. Keep it concise and list concrete steps which need to be carried out. So we did it. We got through all 10. To recap, these heuristics are not prescriptive. They won't tell you what to do, but they will tell you how to do it. So I would recommend that you take a screenshot of this slide You can also search for Nielsen usability heuristics when you land up doing your challenge in a moment. But please refer to these when you are designing or when you are commenting on others' designs, so that we can have a shared language about why decisions have been made and how to make constructive feedback understandable to all people. So use these heuristics when you're designing as a checklist to make sure things are usable and logical. And you can also use them at all stages of design, ranging from paper prototypes all the way to high fidelity wireframes. Now, the final section, we are going to chat about wireframes. This is what UI is all about. A wireframe is a static representation of your product and a basic guideline for a website or an app. Wireframes are actually also a tool for communicating within a product team, as they represent visual design, structure and flow and features, and can be easily understood by all teams involved with product development. We've seen a number of wireframes while learning about the usability heuristics, so we should be all familiar with what they can look like. Now, wireframes live on a fidelity spectrum, ranging from low on the left to high fidelity. Let's just be clear right now, nobody starts with pixel perfect, beautiful designs full of gorgeous graphics and super cool fonts. We always start as simple as possible in order to iterate rapidly on our designs. And once our designs are finalized, we can go from this to this to this. So we're going to start on the left, and then we're going to move our way towards the right. Low fidelity wireframes, most of them will look like this. Most wireframes can and should look like this until your designs are finalized. Low fidelity wireframes can be as basic as drawings on paper, showing initial ideas quickly, cheaply, and with very little energy. Low fidelity, also known as lo-fi, by the way, lo-fi wireframes, should establish basic content, layout, and visuals before building up to digital wireframes. The purpose of these lo-fi wireframes is to visualize requirements and get everyone on the same page early on. Do not skip this step. Without basic wireframes, you're actually putting your team at risk of repetition, misunderstandings, and a lot of wasted time. So how do we actually do this? Anybody can create paper prototypes. All you need is paper and pen. Draw one screen per page, and if you make a mistake, don't fix it, just start it again. This is what lo-fi means. It means your mistakes are cheap because you can redo them quickly. Keep it at a high level, so don't worry about exactly what your website's going to say, exactly what the photo is going to be. Block out space for content like images, text, and headings. And you can also write any annotations in the margins of your page. Where does this button take me to? What screen does this connect with? What color do you think might go here? You can draw little arrows, lines off of your wireframes and write in the margins for further detail. So annotate, annotate, annotate. Now, the purpose of a high fidelity wireframe is to ensure your design decisions are communicated to the team building the end product and ensure that users are accounted for. Even though it's tempting, please do not jump ahead to this step. As I said, creating pixel perfect designs in the early stages of the design process doesn't make any sense. You want to focus on exploring many different iterations and options before putting the effort into making the final design. Think of this like using pencil before upgrading to pen. It's easier to test hypotheses and iterate your designs when using low fidelity wireframes to begin with. Then when it's all finalized, you can make your final designs. Digital wireframes can be created using UI software such as Adobe XD, Sketch, InVision, or Figma. I would recommend Figma for this purpose unless you do have access to the Adobe suite. Figma is a very user-friendly, collaborative, and free tool. Digital designs remain low cost while beginning to play around with color, shape, font, and style. You may or may not get to this point, let me be clear, and that is okay. If you're keen to jump on the tools, create an account with Figma. As I said, it's free, collaborative, and easy to sign up for. It could be a good place to land up when you're finishing your process, and there are lots of templates you can use as a starting point. So we made it. I just want to recap some of the points that we came across so that we can just consolidate all the information that we have learned. So Now you should know UX and UI are related, but they're not the same thing. There are many roles within the UX UI space, and they do not all require artistic prowess. You don't need to be an artist. You don't need to be a beautiful graphic designer to be able to conduct user research and understand people. There are many different roles, and they support many different skill sets. So understand users to design the right thing, know the right tools to design things right. So a double diamond, we start in research, we move to design. We say design the right thing and then design things right. Usability heuristics that we spent a lot of time on inform visual design and can be used as a checklist to assess your work, as well as communicating with your team and having a shared understanding of the design decisions you have made. And wireframes range from low to high fidelity to enable rapid iteration and prototyping. The next steps for you from here is designing a fitness application. As the Women in Tech team mentioned, you will have received an email with the spec. The good news is that there is a lot of information in there already about who your users are, what their motivations are, and how you might represent their needs in an application. Make sure you start with your low fidelity wireframes first, some user research, low fidelity wireframes before moving up to the final thing.
Like to welcome you all. My name is Stephanie Grace. I work for IBM. I'm a designer in the IBM Tech Garage. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about design thinking. So I'm just going to move this so it's not in the way. Great. So I have a question for you. I'd like you to tell me when, where, and what have you heard about design? You might notice that there's a little chat feature in Zoom. If you can answer what you think about design in the chat, that would be fantastic. I know I'm asking you to do something so early in the morning, so take your time with it. But if you can open the chat and tell me what you think about design, where have you heard about it? When have you heard of it? In what context? Engineering. Fantastic. Anybody else? Convenience, software design. Marketing, yep. 3D printing, interesting, yes. Design is a way of creation, very helpful in different places in the context of graphic design. Amazing. So a couple of answers there around the idea of design being a career or an area that you might be interested in. Something else that also came up was graphic design as well. So, you know, sometimes when you can think about design in the form of things that you're engaging with, so physical materials or things that you wear. Think of fashion design and designer labels. You might have also heard about design in the subjects that you're doing at school, so design and technology. And you might also have heard about design through companies. So Apple often gets mentioned as an exemplar company in the pursuit of design. I have a second question for you. I want you to think about something that you enjoy using or an experience that makes you, that you feel like you enjoy. And I want you to tell me what you like about it and how does it make you feel. It can be something that you use on a daily basis. It could be maybe a place that you go to. But again, if you can, in the chat, just tell me an experience that you enjoy, a thing that you enjoy using. YouTube, fantastic. How does it make you feel when you're consuming content on YouTube? Any others? Instagram, oh, another thing, yep. Crocheting, excellent. Relaxing on your hands, yep. Gaming, fantastic. Virtual reality, webtoon comics, great. This is great. Drawing, fantastic. Bike riding, How does it make you feel when you're drawing and when you're reading web comics and when you're bike riding? Playing an instrument, yeah. So as those answers come in, I want to share something that also came up when I prompted this question to others. So one answer that I heard was, this person really liked wearing their headphones because they're so comfortable, and sometimes I actually forget that I'm wearing them. And they said that they feel more confident in themselves because they can study better when they're listening to music. And that's something that I think a lot of well-designed experiences allow you to do. They allow you to walk away feeling quite positive. And you can see in some of the answers in the chat that the emotions that people are talking about are not negative ones, they're positive ones. And that's because somebody has explicitly gone into thinking about what that experience would be like. They're thinking about how you would walk away doing what you did, how you would walk away feeling what you felt, and how you would walk away saying what you're saying today. So I mentioned before, I work in the tech space. I work for IBM and I work in the tech garage. And what we do is we work with a lot of different experts in security. We work in quantum computing. We also work in machine learning as well. And what we do is what's called co-create with our clients. So the idea is that we help our clients design an ideal experience, an experience that they really sort of want to put up there and say, this is fantastic. And in doing that, we're teaching them about how to think like designers. And we use this method called the IBM Garage methodology. And what that does is essentially what it boils down to is trying to put the user at the center of what we do. So much like the kind of experiences that you mentioned in the chat earlier, we're trying to get people to think about what it is that the user is feeling, what it is that we want them to feel, what is that we want them to do or to say. And in line with that, we're also trying to help our clients work through ideas quickly so that we what's called iterate on them. So we think of an idea, we test it out, and we learn from it. So there might be some mistakes that we've done along the way, but by doing things quickly, we can reflect on it, make those mistakes, learn from them, and do better next time. So this idea of co-creation and moving through ideas, I guess, quickly, but mainly the idea of putting users first wasn't really that common in the tech space many years ago. And I'd say it was probably maybe about 13 years ago now. I used to work as a UX designer, designing in-flight entertainment systems and TV UIs, like the one that you can see here on the right-hand side. And if you've been a Foxtel customer, you might recognize the screen on the right. It's the TV menu for the Foxtel IQ3. But then again, maybe you don't, because I think right now they're up to Foxtel IQ5. So maybe I'm sort of showing my age by showing you something that's a number of years ahead of, in the past rather. Anyway, what would happen in these design settings is that airlines and these TV companies, they would essentially purchase pre-built hardware. So they'd buy this bit of hardware and then they'd commission design companies like the one I was working for to then essentially slap on some visuals on the screen and say, you know, okay, we bought something, just make it look pretty. That was what design meant to them. And what you get in the end were these kind of these weird interactions and these weird workflows. Like, you know, you'd go through, and in those days it was very cool and new to be able to record live TV. But because these systems were designed by engineers, the workflow for just going through and deleting your old recordings was so cumbersome. You'd have to go through and select one by one by one and maybe confirm about 3 times before you could actually delete it. But in that process, you couldn't actually check the recording that you had made. So you kind of had to guess from the timestamp and from how long it was. So it wasn't a very nice experience for users. In the days of international travel, I imagine this is something that a vast majority of us haven't been able to do, at least within the last 2 years. You'd be able to get on a plane and you'd be able to use systems that look like this. to choose a TV show or a movie to watch. And something that you might not know is that most of the furniture is actually, including the hardware for these IFEs, were actually purchased by the airline after they've purchased this big metal tube, which is the frame of the airplane. And they'd essentially install these things as part of what's called a retrofit. And what they do is they purchase the body and then they just fill it with stuff that they think they needed. But they hadn't always thought through why they needed something. And so a good example of this is in this airline here, what you can see is the business class part of the airplane. And essentially the selling points of these parts of the planes was the idea that you have nice, space, it's very spacious, you've got a big screen and you can sort of lean back and enjoy the flight and the movie. But something that you might not know from this is that big screen in front of her is actually a touch screen. If you think for a second, why would you purchase a touch screen if the selling point is that you can lean back and enjoy the experience and not have to lean forward and touch whatever's on the screen? And so these airlines probably could have saved themselves a ton of money if they'd gotten someone to stop and think about the experience just a little bit before they made that purchase. Now, I don't want to badmouth this particular airline. This happens to be Singapore Airlines. But I will say that these kind of missteps happened numerous times across multiple airlines. We saw it across Qantas, Virgin, Emirates. These airlines are airlines that we design in-flight entertainment systems for, and they would make the same mistakes over and over again. So we just talked a little bit about what happens when design is brought in as an afterthought. So I want to give you an example of when design was instead brought in at the start. And it's in a context that you might not think design thinking is really important. So 5 years ago, I think about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I was working and living in New York, and I was working for a company called Bloomberg. And if you've ever watched TV shows or movies that involve the stock market, things like The Big Short or Margin Call, you'll see that the Bloomberg terminal is the thing to have if you are working in the finance space. And they're quite well known for their news and their media coverage, and you can see an example of that on the right-hand side. So on those TV shows, you'd be hard-pressed to find that someone is not talking about the world of finance without some kind of visualization or a chart that you see here on the right. And you might think that, oh, design's not really useful here. It's just making charts look pretty. But it's really important because professionals who are using financial software need to be making decisions, and they need to be making it efficiently, effectively, and they need to understand why they're doing it. So what we did in this particular project was we actually, right from the start, we talked to users. So here is, I think, a picture of the control room. So this is the back of the back room that's happening when they're doing a TV show. And you can see there's lots of different screens. They're trying to figure out what's happening, what's coming up next, what kind of content they're going to funnel to the presenters that are currently on air. And in doing this research with the users, we were able to uncover some really interesting pain points. And when I say pain points, I mean things that are really causing them trouble. So one thing that we found was that the producers, these are people that produce the show, they were trying to funnel content to the presenters rather, and they were trying to do a lot of these workarounds. And it was actually really quite cumbersome and quite frustrating because one time we saw that they funneled them the wrong information. So the poor presenter had to sort of backstep on what they said. So in the end, what we were able to do was, in looking and observing these pain points, we were able to think, okay, well, what can we do to improve that situation? And so we ended up rolling out some features that were able to help a lot of customers engage with the content as they were watching it. And these features became extremely popular and the business really sort of touted them as a success. And they tried to communicate within the company that the kind of ways of working that we had followed for this project were really quite successful and that the rest of the company should try and adopt. So today, I'm here to sort of teach you about how to apply some of those design thinking methodologies and those approaches that we applied in that particular project in the same way for today's activities. But really what I want you to walk away with is a realization of how fundamental it is to think like a designer and to think like a designer from the start, not at the end. So what that means is to put people first, to put your users first, right before you start building the thing that you're trying to build. Because if you put people first, what you're going to end up with is you're going to make an impact on the world. If you instead think about design at the end, essentially what you're doing is you're polishing a turd. No one likes turds, even if they are shiny. So if you try and do a little bit of thinking, a little bit of research in design thinking, there's a lot of different methodologies and approaches and activities that you could follow. Here are a couple that I've just picked out. I want to say that no single one of these is the best. What they help you to do is they help you to work through a problem by putting the user first. So today, I want to break down this process into 4 steps that you can then follow and apply in the competition later on. The first step is trying to understand what you're setting out to achieve. So you've probably been given, or you will actually, I think, be given a problem statement of some sort. So here's an example. Students considering university have a very difficult time deciding what they should study. So that problem statement involves a user, it involves an end state, and it involves a challenge. Your task is to then reframe that into a goal. So to solve that problem, you need some kind of direction so that you can improve the current state. So in order to do that, you need to be thinking about who the user is, so students. You need to be thinking about what does success look like for those users? And then what's the means to get there? How do they get to the successful state? The second thing you need to do is think about the context that you're designing for. So when I talk about context, there are 3 things that you can try and focus on. First is the people. Second is the process. And the third is the platform or the way in which that experience is delivered. So people, a nice way, a nice methodology to try and think about the people or your users is to use what's called an empathy map. So what that does is it gets you to think about who these users are in terms of how they think, how they feel, and what they do. And if you think back to earlier in the talk, when I was asking you about the kinds of experiences that you enjoyed, the designer was explicitly thinking about these things because that's the experience, that's the end goal that they want to create. So let's put this in the context of the problem statement that we talked about earlier. So for a student who's trying to consider university, who's trying to consider what to study at university, but they're having a very difficult time. So they might be saying things like, I don't know what I should study at uni. They might be thinking that this is such an overwhelming process. Whatever I choose now will define my whole life. So it's so important. That tells you that they're going to be feeling a lot of pressure, that they're overwhelmed with all of these different options. And to address that, they might be doing things like talking to people about what they're looking to choose. How do those people feel? What are their opinions about it? The next thing to do is to think about the process. So in trying to understand what's happening, much like what I talked about earlier with the control room, when we were trying to observe users, what you want to be doing is looking at how users go about the way that they do things, so that their process. So a good way to capture this is through what's called an as-is scenario. So what is happening right now? And we break that down into four parts, four aspects. So we've got the steps. So what are the broad steps that they're trying to follow? And those steps might include a number of specific activities or behaviors. And then within each of those, how are people thinking? How are people feeling? If we try and apply that in the context of the problem statement that we said before, this person, I think, who do we call it? Steph, that's me, right? Steph. So in order to try and figure out how she should go about choosing what she wants to study, there are four general steps that she follows, or rather we've observed her to follow. The first is that she goes out and she contacts someone. So here she's gone and she's called up her cousin Sarah, because Sarah has recently finished university, and she wants to understand what has Sarah done at university? How did she go about choosing it? But interestingly, the second thing that we observe her doing is that she's really confused, and really what she's trying to get out of Sarah is comfort. She's not sure what she should be doing, and she's just asking for someone to help her, to feel like there's someone out there that can help her with this really difficult task. So that's a really interesting observation that we can make when we look at users. The third step, we notice her that she's trying to now discover what is it that Sarah has done, what is it that she studies. But in doing that, she's learned what Sarah actually is doing right now in her career. So she learns that Sarah is designing a new game that uses AR, that uses potentially maybe VR. So augmented reality. Wow, that's interesting. That's something that I've never considered. What's your job like? How did you get there? Do you like it? Tell me more about it. And so what we discover in this is that Steph starts to realize that there's things beyond university. So then from there, she uses that opportunity to work backwards. So Sarah, she asks Sarah, okay, well then, what is it like being designed? But how did you get there? What degree did you take? And so now she starts learning about what kinds of things she should consider in different courses and degrees. And that leads her to this fourth step around evaluating, like, what is it? What's that degree like? What kind of ATARs are required? Did Sarah have to study really, really hard to do that? What was involved in studying that? So in breaking down this process of how Steph tried to understand or try to make a decision around what she should study at uni, we've identified a couple of interesting things. We've identified a pain point, something that is causing her a lot of stress and difficulty. In this case, we can see that she's experiencing a lot of difficult emotions, and what she's really trying to do in her process is she's trying to look for ways to address that emotional need, that need of feeling like she's not alone. We've also seen that actually something that Steph didn't initially realize she was doing was all she was thinking about was the next step, university. She wasn't thinking about the step beyond that. And if she did think about the step beyond that, she'd be able to work backwards. So there's an opportunity there for someone like Steph in her position to think about, well, if we're able to help someone think about industry options, maybe it would be easier to help them link and choose what kind of degrees would help them to get there. So we've identified 2 pain points and 2 opportunities that we could explore in our design. The third thing in this second step is around platform. So today today we talked a little bit about users and what they need, and I don't really want to spend too much time on the platform because of the time constraints. But essentially in industry, a lot of design work involves a technology that's already in mind. Not all the time we're going to be thinking about designing from scratch, but in any case, it's really important to think about the constraints and the challenges. And so what I mean by that, I mean that constraints, are there things that we can't change that we need to work around? So this could be the technology, or it could be the environment that we're designing for. And if there are any challenges, so are there things that we need to overcome? What are the things that we need to overcome? Because this is what impacts our success. So in the case that we just talked about then, we identified these two opportunities. How might we address the emotional need, and how might we help link uni choices with industry options? So we might have constraints like, well, we can't change the number of degree options that there are available to students. We don't have control over the industry opportunities that are available. But what we can do is we can look at how we can address the emotional state of students when they're going through this process. We can help them explore career path options. And lastly, it's important to be clear, what are the kinds of things that you don't know about that you need to find out more and do a little bit more research into? The third step, now that you've done all of this research and you have a bit of an idea of what's happening and where the opportunities are, you need to then decide on what direction to take. So you've probably come up with a lot of different ideas at that point in time, but you can't do all of them. And so what you need is a criteria for deciding which direction to go in. So that criteria could be looking at how impactful that idea could be. How feasible is it? Is it doable given the time and given the resources that you have? And there are other two examples that I've written up here. I want to just for this, the purpose of this, I want to focus just on impact and feasibility. So when you're looking at the opportunities that you want to explore in a bit of detail, I think it's important that you be clear about what you mean by impact, or what you mean by the different axes that you're going to decide on, the different criteria. So in this example for impact, I'm talking about how many users will it help and how much. In terms of feasibility, I think of it as, well, okay, maybe I'm going to look at it as how fast can I build it, and do I have the right skills and the resources to do it? So then what I do is I get all my different ideas that I've come up with and I plot them on here, and I say, okay, this idea here, if I create a tool that is able to map these job ads that are out there, so to help people get an idea of the kind of jobs that they see themselves in, and I create a mapping between that and the degrees that are available that will help you prepare that for the role. I think that can really help users and really help students decide what they want to do. So I put it quite high on this axis over here, but that's probably really difficult for me to do because I don't know how I can go to these job boards and then pull the job ad. And I don't really know how to look at the description of a university degree and look at all the graduate skills that they say students come away with and sort of create that link between them. So I'm going to put it over here. An idea that might be higher on the list of things that I probably could explore, maybe would fall around here. So something that's highly feasible, so it's highly doable. I'm able to do it because I've got the resources or the skills or the knowledge. And it's pretty high in terms of the impact. A lot of students are going to be helped by this. So I might go away and pick this idea over here on the top right. Or I might maybe pick something just a little bit below. So just a little less feasible and a little lower on the impact. So this area here is a good region to pick your ideas from. The last thing that I think is critical to exploring your design ideas is to test and evaluate them. So earlier I talked about in the IBM Tech Garage, what we do is we iterate on ideas quickly. We take an idea, we try and do something with it. And what we do is we test and evaluate it. And we use that as an opportunity to understand what mistakes we made so that way we can improve on them and get something better out quickly. So what does testing and evaluating involve? Well, it's an experiment. Think of it like science. In science, you have a hypothesis, or in this case, you might have an objective. You need something to then measure against. So you need to have a measurable outcome. If I'm saying or claiming that this new set of headphones, it's going to make you feel more confident in yourself because it helps you calm down as you're studying. How do I back up that claim? I need to be able to measure how people are feeling. I need to be able to measure how confident they feel. And so that leads me to the third thing, which is a metric. So the metric that tells us, okay, well, we're saying that people who feel highly confident are going to enjoy this. So what we're trying to see is, well, in terms of the emotions that we measure, what tells us that someone is highly confident? What tells us that they're enjoying something? So in the example that we've been following, maybe my statement, my test definition is, if we provide students, so here are the users, with a way to explore the relationship between career paths and uni degrees, then we can help build confidence in their decision making. And that last bit is the thing that we're measuring. So then we say, okay, well, if we measure this by looking at how they feel after they use the tool, then we know that we'll have made it when students are anticipating starting uni, or if they're anticipating starting the degree or going into a new career. Because if students are doing those things, we're saying that they're going to feel more confident. So to recap, the 4 steps that are the 4 steps around the design thinking process that I'd like you to try and remember is understanding what you're trying to set out to achieve. That's the first part. The second is, remember, you need to think about the context that you're designing for. So who are the people? What are the processes that they go through? What's the platform, or how are you going to serve it up to them? And from that, you'll probably come up with a lot of different ideas, but you can only do a handful, or in this case, you can really only do one. So you need to decide. And so in order to decide, you need to have a criteria. And then lastly, don't just do the idea, check if you've done it well, because in doing that, you're able to then evaluate if you've done it well and make improvements on it. If you make a mistake, fix it. Making mistakes is fantastic. It helps you to figure out what you could do better. I think one of the things that design teaches us is that making mistakes is actually really important and something that you shouldn't be afraid of. And it shouldn't be something that you are ashamed about. So in your design, when approaching your design challenge, I would recommend you do these 6 things that cover off those 4 steps. So you should have a goal statement. You should try and do an empathy map. So think about who the users are. If you can, go through an as-is scenario. Take one of the scenarios or the workflows that they go through and break it down. Think about what they're doing at different steps. How are they feeling? How are they thinking? And look at that as a way to pinpoint, where is the experience going wrong? What's not working for this user? Because that's where you can turn it into an opportunity. How can you improve that? Then think about the constraints, challenges, and questions. What are the things that you can't change? What are the things that you have to work around? What are the things that you can improve on? And what are the things that you don't understand? Then prioritize your ideas. Pick based on what? What is the criteria that you're trying to measure against? And then lastly, be clear on testing, right? You want to make sure that what you're doing is going to be leaving your users with a positive experience. So I think I have 5 minutes left. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them. Maybe you're thinking, actually, I don't quite get what you said about this. So you want to clarify something, throw it in the chat. If you want to go deeper on something, throw it in the chat. Or maybe you have something random that you just want to ask me. That's also quite fine too. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. And that's it on my end. Okay, so I think we've got a couple of minutes. Question here, what degree did you do? And do you think it prepared you well for a degree in UX design? So yes, I think it did. I studied a degree at Sydney University. It was called Design Computing. And I believe it is still a degree that's available today. In terms of preparation, I felt it did. It was fairly unique at the time. There weren't very many degrees out there that allowed me to study technology and to study design. And so it was in this, the degree program is part of the Faculty of Architecture, Design and Computing at the time. And so the degree takes design thinking ideas that you would typically see in architecture, right? So architects, they're thinking about users of the space. And they're thinking about, well, how are users going to feel? How do they move through the space? What kind of materials? What's the platform that I'm trying to create? So very much the thinking from design in that part of the world, and then applying it to technology. So I feel very lucky to have stumbled across that. And when I say stumbled across it, I literally, when I was choosing my degree, we had these books, I think it was called UAC books, where I flicked the pages open and I just pointed to something on the page, and it was the course, the degree Design Computing, and I read it and it sounded great, so I put it down on my list. So very lucky there. There's another question here. How did you get to IBM? So I've been in the design industry for a number of years, and I've started at a design studio or an agency. So we were designing in-flight entertainment systems and TV UIs, and that was a lot of fun. But after a number of years, I ended up moving to the States. And so I couldn't continue working for that company. So I ended up working in a couple of places. I worked for some banks over there, and then I worked for Bloomberg, and that was sort of my first taste of a large corporation. And it was very different from a small or medium-sized design agency. And so that opened me to the world of corporate culture and resources and understanding impact on a scale that I hadn't quite understood before. And so that was a really nice change. A number of years later, I moved back to Sydney. So I'm originally from Sydney, and I went the other way, and I went to small agencies. I felt like I wanted to get a little bit more hands-on and get back into the design space here in Sydney. And then after a couple of years, I felt like I wanted to find a place that would allow me to make a broader impact on the world again, but in a different way and on a larger scale. And that's how I found IBM. Another question here. Are women a minority in your career? And if yes, are they disadvantaged sometimes? Interesting question. You know, it's interesting. In the tech space generally, as I understand it, don't quote me on this, but as I understand it, women are the minority. In technical roles, like if I know Sherry, who's going to be someone who's mentoring you after this, in spaces like her, the data science, or if you're an engineer like Michelle, who's also one of our mentors today, women are a minority. And that can be quite intimidating at times. Interestingly, in design, I think it's about 50-50. And I think there's this view that for more people-focused areas, women are better suited to that because we're better with our emotions, whereas the technical logic kind of thinking, that's a very male thing to do. And I think this way of thinking is really quite archaic. You look at the last couple of years, I think women have done amazing. Couple of years, actually, I should say extend that beyond. If you look throughout history, women do a damn good job when we put our minds to it. And I think it's about time people learn to accept that and to embrace it. And sometimes it can feel like you're pushing up against barriers and glass ceilings. But the world is changing. And today you're here and you're part of an initiative that's looking to change that. So if you continue to work hard and to be passionate about what you're doing, and to tell the world that actually, yeah, I'm a woman, but that doesn't mean that I'm any less better at doing it, I think we can break through that. Liking these comments here. Yes, Ada Lovelace, for example. Yes, she was fantastic. First coder. First female coder. I might also mention that there's a conference called the Grace Hopper conference, something that I was very lucky to have attended when I was based in the US. And that was fantastic. That's a conference, if you ever get a chance to go to that. I think they have scholarships too. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But it's a conference specifically for women in technology. And it was absolutely inspiring to see some of the fantastic women in the tech space talk and involve us in discussions and in workshops. And I came away from that conference feeling like, damn, I'm so glad to be a woman in tech. So if you ever get a chance to, see if you can go. So I think that's time's up for me. Thank you so much for having me today.